at war with itself and another Prime Minister's position at risk, you do need to hear from a Tory big beast, and I can speak to one now, former Brexit Secretary and Party Chair David Davis. Good morning, Mr Davis.
I do love being introduced as a grandee this time of the morning. I don't feel like one.
Well, maybe it's something to do with our age, David. Happy birthday in a couple of weeks' time. Now, on Tuesday, what are you going to do? Are you going to vote for or against the government's Rwanda legislation?
Oh, for the legislation. I mean, I don't know what Michael Gove said to you, but the legislation is about the toughest immigration legislation I've ever seen, in truth. And I actually think the Prime Minister's right that it can't go any further for reasons I can explain if you want. But and he has to take a grip of this. I mean, I am, as you well know, Trevor, I'm pretty much the last man standing in the House of Commons when it comes to human rights matters. But something's gone wrong in the asylum system. I mean, you want to measure a bit on Braverman's watch. 55% of Albanians were being cleared for asylum. Well, it's sort of daft, you know. It's Albania is not a dangerous country in that sense. So there was something wrong. He had to do something, and I think this is just about the only optimal point in handling this issue of the cross-channel boats.
That's interesting. Do you blame Suella Braverman for essentially not making something change while she was there?
I think the department, look, the Home Office has for as long as I can remember, had a bad reputation, often from the Home Secretary. I remember one Home Secretary arriving on the doorstep and saying, this department's not fit for purpose.
That was John Reid, the Labour Home Secretary.
It was John Reid, that's right. And it's had problems all along the way, partly because it's got really difficult problems to deal with. But I don't see much sign, bluntly, of Suella improving anything while she was there. I mean, it's a tough job, don't kid ourselves. But it's all very well for her to come along and blame everybody else now. She's been in charge of this department for well over a year, and it didn't improve. So there's actions had to be taken, and the actions have now been taken, or are in the process of being taken. And I actually think that this is a really hard piece of law, but it's based on, it's literally written from the decision of the Supreme Court. I mean, which is probably the only way to write asylum law these days, right around the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And we've got what we have.
So Bill Cash has assembled this star chamber of apparently reputable lawyers to study this legislation, but he's already said that what he's seen from the legislation, he's a lawyer himself, it doesn't do the job, which suggests that he will go the opposite way to you and vote against. What would you say to Bill Cash and those around him who think that this doesn't go far enough, including Robert Jenrick, for example, the now resigned immigration minister?
Yeah, well, let's see the detail of what they say before trying to answer just a sort of generic. But one of the things that Jenrick himself said, slightly breaking the rules on the treatment of government legal advisors, he claims that Eady, who is one of the James Eady, one of the government's advisors, said, "Oh, there's a 50-50 chance of this not working." Well, that's not true. Even if you look into the detail of what Jenrick said, what he actually claimed is that there's a 50-50 chance of the European Court issuing what they call an Article 39 ruling. That's what stopped the planes on the tarmac last time, this general ruling. Well, actually, this law gives ministers the right to ignore those general rulings. So even on the sort of level of argument we've seen so far, I don't think what they have stands up. Also, if Bill wants to take it further, if Bill wants to make it effectively disapply the ECHR in total, disapply the European Convention on Human Rights in total, he's got a number of questions to answer. What are you going to do about the Good Friday Agreement? Good Friday Agreement is written on top of the ECHR. It requires application of the ECHR. Yeah. What are you going to do about the Brexit deal, which also requires the ECHR. So, I mean, the Prime Minister's right that there is a limit to what to which you can go there, even if you're not like me, you know. And I'm a human rights supporter. I don't want us to pull out the.
You're very clear. You're very clear with your colleagues. There's going to be no resigning from the ECHR. Let me ask you about the eventual fate of this legislation. It looks like it's going to get through this week, but then it goes into committee stages and the amendments get debated and all of that. There's still going to be the danger from the government's point of view that this thing might fall. Let's imagine that it does. Where does that leave Mr. Sunak? Is that the end of him as Prime Minister?
No, it isn't. I mean, look, the paper's been full of references to 1986, which, if I remember correctly, before my time, but if I remember correctly, I think it was Sunday trading legislation under Margaret Thatcher. That didn't bring down Margaret Thatcher. She went on to win a spectacular election victory within a year. So I think, you know, you can overstate these things. I mean, there's an awful sort of air of gloom in the newspapers around the moment because we're 20 odd points behind. Well, surprise, surprise. So we were in the 80s. So we were in 1990 before we won again. I think.
It's very interesting, David. That's very interesting. So would I be unfair to sum up your position as things are looking bleak, but I have confidence in our leader and we will march on to victory?
Well, we've got a decent. I think we've got a chance of victory. I don't think it's all over. That's my point. I mean, look, you started out by introducing me as a sort of a very elderly MP. Put it that way. The advantage of that is I've been around and seen this before on more than one occasion. And, you know, we come through these things so long as we keep our head and do the right thing. I mean, the thing that's most damaging to the party at the moment is the division. Is the splits, you know? That's what the country hates. I've addressed two Conservative functions in the last couple of days, and the one thing that really upsets them are the splits. And they don't blame Rishi for that. I tell you, they want to get back out on the streets and fight, but you can't do that if you're fighting each other.
You sound rather cross with your colleagues.
No, I've seen it before. Look, I mean, politics is about argument. It's about debate. It's about dispute. But what it shouldn't be about is manoeuvring for your future leadership position or whatever it might be that's driving some of these things. I don't mind at all. Bill Cash saying, I think this is not right because of X or Y, and can we modify A and B to make it work? And we can have that debate, and that's how Parliament works. That's how the we deliver good legislation. It's entirely possible that the government lawyers haven't got it absolutely perfectly right. But I think in grand terms, the public want us to make a decision on this and get it resolved. And I think we've got something we can do. Yeah.
You may have missed the question I asked you rather than ignored it. But who is actually on manoeuvres?
Oh well, I'm not going to name them. All my colleagues know who they are.
Come on.
And it will be to their long term. Again, I've seen this before. It'll be to their disadvantage. People who trade off their own future against the future of the party always lose. So you read the newspapers. You want to know who it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've got Braverman in there. Badenoch, maybe. You're not saying no. Okay.
There's a list.
Let's deal with this because of course you're a grand figure now, but of course you are a bit of a serial troublemaker yourself. You resigned your seat on civil liberties grounds and won it back and so on. But seriously, what is your advice to Rishi Sunak about dealing with this kind of rebellion? What should he be doing now?
Well, firstly, you do have to talk to them. I mean, you mustn't just dismiss rebellions. The whole point of Parliament, as I say, is debate and discussion and getting it right. But broadly speaking, I think he's got the legislation in about the right place. So it's not going to be a massive change. There might be fine changes, and have that debate, and take our time over it. I don't rush it through, and I think that's what we're doing. I think it's going to come back after Christmas, and people will perhaps have settled down a bit then. I mean, there's been a lot of fierce debate, fierce but almost personal attacks in the last few days. Let that ease away and come back and deal with the issue as the issue, not as a reason for a factional argument.
Last quick point. You're a veteran of parliamentary campaigns, leadership campaigns and all of that. I think you were a whip at one point. Have you got any sense of the numbers that might rebel?
Quite small, I think. People. You mentioned Braverman. People always overestimate her support. Look back at the leadership voting numbers, and my impression from talking to colleagues is the vast majority want to get on with this. Vast majority. Now, the newspapers have been saying time and time again, "Oh, you only need 29 to vote against." Well, 29 is quite a big number, actually, when it comes to voting against a major piece of government legislation. So I think it will get through next week. I think there'll be some argument about amendments, but unless the government agrees them, I don't think even the amendments will go through.
David Davis, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.